Joseph. Here it is, chapter 40, verse 1. Sometime after this, the cupbearer of the king of Egypt and his baker committed an offense against their lord, the king of Egypt. And Pharaoh was angry with his two officers, the chief cupbearer and the chief baker, and he put them in custody in the house of the captain of the guard in the prison where Joseph was confined. That's where we left Joseph off in chapter 39. Joseph was thrown into prison because he was wrongfully accused of trying to hit on Potiphar's wife. Potiphar gets upset and ends up sending him to prison. Now the captain of the guard appointed Joseph to be with them being the baker and the cupbearer, and he attended them. They continued for some time in custody. Now verses 5 through 8, just for the sake of summarizing this, we're going to hear it a couple different times. Both the cupbearer and the baker are going to have these dreams. They're each going to have a dream. Now keep in mind, dreams have been coming in twos. That's been pretty common. Joseph's dream to his brothers, remember, it came in twos. We'll see this with Pharaoh's dream. So it comes in twos. They're going to have these dreams, and they're troubled by these dreams, and so they go to different people to find these interpretations. And finally you get in verse 8, as they go to Joseph about the matter, he says, "Do not interpretations belong to God? Please tell them to me." So Joseph recognizes God ultimately can interpret these dreams. Let me know what these dreams are. And so we end up getting some insight. Here's these dreams. Verse 9. So the chief cupbearer told his dream to Joseph and said to him, "In my dream there was a vine before me, and on the vine there were 3 branches. And as soon as it budded, it blossoms shot forth, and the clusters ripened into grapes. Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them into Pharaoh's cup and placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand." Then Joseph said to him, "This is its interpretation. The 3 branches are 3 days. And in 3 days Pharaoh will lift up your head and restore you to your office, and you shall place Pharaoh's cup in his hand as formerly when you were as when you were his cupbearer." And then here's Joseph's kind of, as he gives the interpretation, his kind of plea with him in verses 14 and 15. "Only remember me when it is well with you, and please do me this kindness to mention me to Pharaoh, so to get me out of this house, for I was indeed stolen out of the land of the Hebrews, and here also I have done nothing that they should put me into the pit." And so here's this moment where Joseph interprets the dream of the baker, and he says, "Listen, you're going to be next to Pharaoh again one day. Can you please remember me?" That's going to be really important later on. Well, now the baker's kind of standing there next to him and going, "Well, that ain't too bad, right? Let me tell you my dream." Okay, so he begins to tell him his dream. Verse 16, when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was favorable, he said to Joseph, "I also had a dream. There were 3 cake baskets on my head, and in the uppermost basket there were all sorts of baked food for Pharaoh. But the birds were eating it out of the basket on my head." And Joseph answered and said, "This is its interpretation." Now surely at this point the baker's going, let's hear it, okay? "The 3 baskets are 3 days. Cool. In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head." Now, I love how the ESV has this grammatically posed here, because obviously there's no lines or question marks or commas. But in 19 it says, "In 3 days, Pharaoh will lift up your head," which is exactly what he said to the baker. And in the ESV it goes, "dash from you, exclamation point, dash, and hang you on a tree. And the birds will eat the flesh from you." Brilliant, right? I don't know if I'm being shaped by movies too much, but there seems to be a sense of like, the prison just goes cold, dead silent. Like, this is awkward, right? 3 days, you're going to be lifted up, cupbearer. You're going to sit at his right hand again. You're going to be able to do what you did before. Baker, you're going to die, okay? Verse 20, on the 3rd day, when it was Pharaoh's birthday, he made a feast for all of his servants and lifted up the head of the chief cupbearer and the head of the chief baker among his servants. He restored the chief cupbearer to his position, and he placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted to them. Yet the chief cupbearer, here it is, the chief cupbearer did not remember Joseph, but forgot him. It's really important back in verses 14 and 15. That was the request, right? "Please remember me." He forgets him. Now this gives way to chapter 41, because Pharaoh himself is now going to have some dreams. After 2 whole years, so he forgot about him. Cupbearer's doing his whole thing. He's still serving Pharaoh, but 2 years this has been going on, and he has forgotten Joseph completely. After 2 whole years, Pharaoh dreamed that he was standing by the Nile, and behold, there came up out of the Nile 7 cows, attractive and plump, and they fed in the reed grass. And behold, 7 other cows, ugly and thin, came out of the Nile after them and stood by the other cows on the bank of the Nile. And the ugly thin cows ate up the 7 attractive plump cows, and Pharaoh awoke. So Pharaoh has this dream of 7 cows that come out of the Nile. They're eating grass. They're plump. They're in a healthy shape. And then there's 7 thin, kind of ugly cows that come up, and they consume the 7 plump cows. So the Pharaoh awakes, and he goes, "What was that?" right? Kind of shakes it off, and he goes back to sleep. Verse 5, and he fell asleep and dreamed a second time. And behold, 7 ears of grain, plump and good, were growing on one stalk. And behold, after them sprouted 7 ears, thin and blighted by the east wind. And the thin ears swallowed up the seven plump full ears. And Pharaoh awoke, and behold, it was a dream. So in the morning his spirit was troubled. And he sent and called for the magicians of Egypt and all its wise men. Pharaoh told them his dreams, but there was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh. So it's been 2 whole years. Joseph's still in prison. Now the camera kind of pans over to Pharaoh. He's having these dreams. We'll just kind of focus on the cow thing, but there's ears of corn, or what does it say, corn or wheat. He has these, and then there's these 7 cows. And so, long story, of 14 of these things, 7 consume the other 7. That's what's going on. 7 ugly things consume these 7 healthy things. And then we get there, but there was none who could interpret them to Pharaoh. So Pharaoh, being startled by this idea, goes in and says, hey, can somebody help me with this? Goes to all the wise men, all the magicians. Nobody can interpret these dreams. And then suddenly it dawns on the cupbearer. I know somebody who can interpret dreams, right? So he recognizes his offense. If you read verses 9 through 24, here's kind of what happens. The cupbearer comes to his wits and says, oh my goodness, Pharaoh, please forgive me. I forgot there's a guy that when I had a dream, I was in prison. When you weren't happy with me, I had this dream, shared it with him. He told me what was going to happen, and it happened. So Pharaoh hears this and goes, get him up here. Clean shaves him, gives him new clothes, brings him up, and he stands before Pharaoh. And now Pharaoh tells Joseph the very dream that we just read about. Verse 25, Joseph responds with an interpretation. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. God has revealed to Pharaoh what he's about to do. The 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are one. The 7 lean and ugly cows that came up from them are 7 years, and the 7 empty ears, blighted by the east wind, are also 7 years of famine. It is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. There will come 7 years of great plenty throughout all the land of Egypt, but after them there will arise 7 years of famine, and all the plenty will be forgotten in the land of Egypt. The famine will consume the land, and the plenty will be unknown in the land by reason of the famine that will follow, for it will be very severe. Verse 32 says, and the doubling of Pharaoh's dreams means the thing is fixed by God, and God will shortly bring it about. So Pharaoh's dream essentially means that there's going to be the next 14 years. We're going to have 7 years of famine. But before those 7 years of famine, you're going to have the 7 years of prosperity. Now, Joseph is very clear. God is revealing this to Pharaoh for him to prepare in some way. What Joseph does next, though, he's there for the interpretation, but he kind of steps in and now begins to give counsel to Pharaoh what he's supposed to do. And so that's what you see in verses 33 through 36. Joseph tells Pharaoh to store away all the grain and everything that he can in storehouses during the 7 years of plenty to prepare for the 7 years of famine. All right? We're all familiar with the story. Now, regardless if he goes out of bounds or not, Pharaoh likes this plan. Verse 37 says, this proposal pleased Pharaoh and all of his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom this is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards the throne will I be greater than you. And Pharaoh said to Joseph, see, I have set you over all the land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh took his signet ring, crazy, back in chapter 38, his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand and clothed him in garments and fine linen and put a gold chain around his neck. Again, crazy, chapter 38. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, I am Pharaoh, and without your consent, no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt. Verse 45 says, verse 45, and Pharaoh called Joseph's name, it's an Egyptian name, Zaphanath Paneah, and he gave him in marriage Asenath, the daughter of Potipharah, priest of On. So Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. So in short, if you didn't pick up on what we just read, I know that we live in a democratic republic, but it's hard, and so it's hard for us to understand. But this would be like being places like the vice president, if you will. It's not perfect, but he's kind of like over everyone except the president, right? Over everyone, and so he's in charge, and everywhere he goes, everyone's going to recognize that he's in charge. And so this is kind of the spot where he goes from this pit, and he goes into now Pharaoh's house. He's second in command. And you can see there in verse 46, Joseph, he's 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh. He's also given a wife at this time, which is helpful because here's what happens in the next three sections, which took place with what Bailey read, verses 46 through 55. If you look at 46 through 49, now here's Joseph. His name has changed. He has an Egyptian wife. The 7 years of plenty happen. Now, him being second in command, he does exactly what what he talked about in instituting in his plan before Pharaoh. There's so much grain that they just stop keeping track of how much food is set aside, right? So much food is set aside, verses 46 through 49. They plan for it. In verses 50 through 52, before we get to the 7 years of famine, we're told that Joseph has two sons. You can see it there, verses 50 through 52, Manasseh and Ephraim. Now, they're very important for the story moving forward, but Joseph is given two sons. And then in 53 through 55, the famine comes, and everyone is directed to go see Joseph so that he can give away and ration out food and all that stuff. And we end the chapter 41, with verses 56 and 57. So when the famine had spread all over the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, so not just in Egypt, 57 says, all the earth came to Egypt to Joseph to buy grain because the famine was severe over all of the earth, which is really, really important for the movie, or for the movie, goodness gracious, for the story going forward. Because if the famine is affecting everyone, not just in Egypt, that means it's eventually going to get to his family, right? And so it's going to be really important going forward. And that's chapter 40 and 41 of the book of Genesis. Now, there's a lot that we can navigate through this, but as I said, what I want to do is I want to focus on the two main characters that are left in the book of Genesis because they're very prominent in these two chapters, and they're going to set the tone for the rest of Genesis. And the first is, of course, Joseph. All right? Now, I think we only got the tip of the iceberg in recognizing the Lord is with Joseph and what that means. We saw a lot of that last week. What's important here that I want to be able to pull out are three things that I think are worth bringing up. The first thing is, let's just acknowledge in this story, God chose to use Joseph to bring him from a pit, and now he's second in command in Egypt. And all the while, I just want to acknowledge, Joseph seems to be in all of this the bright spot of Genesis. He is a man of integrity. At most, you can accuse him of being braggadocious with a coat of many colors when he tells the whole dream thing to his brothers, but I don't even think that's the case. And the reality is, when you've got Abraham failing, Adam failing, Noah failing, Isaac failing, Jacob failing, we don't see failure in Joseph. He's a man of integrity. He's worth looking at and being where he is and faithful in where he is. It's interesting. On Friday, I've always opened up to guys that can work with me. Just to spend time, we can eat together or whatever. And people always say, I'd love to come or whatever. But I've spent more time with one guy in Pella than anybody else. Maybe most people combined. And that's a guy who is part of our congregation, Dylan Lee. Dylan Lee comes over almost every single Friday just to spend time with me. We hang out, we talk, and we have amazing conversations while we work. And last Friday, we were working, and we were just talking about him and where he's at and all that stuff. And we started talking about his friend group and how they're dating and married, and some have kids now. And he said, in light of all this, what I've learned more than anything is when I enter into the dating world, I just want to do things right. I just want to do things right. And by that, he means sexual integrity, communication, loving his future wife well. As a side note, I genuinely do not know, ladies, how you've allowed Dylan to remain single. I do not understand that. I have zero category for the fact that Dylan is still single. That amazes me. I know the man very well. He doesn't have the plague or anything like that. He's perfectly healthy, loves Jesus, is good looking, whatever, okay? I don't get it. That's on you. That's on you, okay? But that statement, was really, he just wants to do things right. And honestly, I just look at Joseph, the main character at the end of Genesis, and he just does things right. He just keeps doing things right. It's crazy to watch. In some of these ways, it leads me to the second thing in how he's doing right. He's this picture of fortitude and patience and contentment. He's faithful. What's interesting is you notice in chapter 40, it uses the language of the jails that he's in. It uses the word pit there, which is right in Hebrew. His brothers throw him in a pit, and then he ends up, because of false accusations, in another pit. And we have nowhere in divine writing. At most, you can see in verses 14 and 15, he's acknowledging, he's not complaining about it, he's not pushing it away either. He's gotten a bad, set of cards here. And he's not moaning or complaining, it was someone else. or this, and we see that all, and we go, well, the Bible doesn't do that. Remember Abraham and Adam and Jacob. Remember Isaac, how much they blamed other people. That's the first thing Adam does. And Joseph, going from pit to pit, doesn't do any of this. He doesn't blame others. He doesn't blame God. And he sits here with integrity doing things right. And so the first thing is like, I want to just kind of look and go, I want to see Joseph, and I go, there's things in Joseph that I want to be like. As a man of integrity, he's doing this the right way. He's not complaining. I thought Kevin DeYoung said it well. He said this, where is it at? He says, yes, we are profoundly affected by the people around us, but nevertheless, no human being had more control over Joseph than Joseph. I hope you believe that about yourself. Whether your circumstances, whatever circumstances you're in, whatever sort of hand you've been dealt in life, that seems good or bad, no one has more to do with shaping who you are, no human being, than you. I say that as a clear five-pointer. I believe in God's sovereignty. We'll get to all that in a minute. Just acknowledging for a second a culture that's constantly blaming someone else, never taking the onus. Joseph is a good example to go, dude's content. He's not whining about his lot in life. Can tell how many times it was like, well, you had drug addict parents. I'm so sorry. I'm like, that it just is. I could moan about it and go on and always use that as an excuse. But no, I see Joseph and I go, that's something that I think I'd like to be like. I think that's worth acknowledging there. The third thing is actually pretty cool. If you can jot your eyes back to verses 37 and 39, 37, 38, and 39. Because I think there's something we're seeing in one of the main characters here with Joseph, where it says this. It says, this proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants. And Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in whom is the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has shown you all of this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. It's kind of odd that a pagan, both God and king, because they believe he's the sun god, would acknowledge that the Spirit of God is with Joseph. That's a crazy thing. And then it also, he also acknowledges that he's discerning and wise. Now this got me curious, and so I did some work here. I'm going to ask you to nerd out for a second with me because this is kind of wild. Look at verse 26, if you could. When Pharaoh tells Joseph the dream, Joseph begins to interpret the dream, and this is what he says in verse 26. He says, the 7 good cows are 7 years, and the 7 good ears are 7 years. The dreams are 1. Now, this is curious because if you go back at chapter 41, verses 1 through 8, look at the dream itself that were given by Pharaoh. It doesn't use the word good. You can look at it there. But when Joseph goes back and interprets the dream, he adds the word good there. The word in Hebrew is the word tov. Tov. Now here's why this matters. In all of chapter 41, you can see it over and over again, describing the other cows or the other ears. They're described as ugly again and again and again. That word for ugly is the word ra. And so here's why I spent half of a sermon 37 chapters ago trying to explain to us the difference between tov and ra. And the reason we had to do this is because the last time they were put together was 37 chapters ago. They were put together in Genesis chapter 3 because of self-autonomy and pride. Someone sought out to discern, to know the difference between good and evil. This is what was brought about, put in front of us. And it was seen as a sin because it had all to do with choosing not God. And yet here, brilliantly, oh my goodness, brilliantly, Moses being led by the inspiration, under the inspiration of the Holy Spirit, brings these two words together and has a man who is being led by God can discern what is good and what is evil, what is good and what is bad. And I think that's a good reminder, having the Spirit of God within us, going forward, the Holy Spirit will help us see this is good, this is bad, this is good, this is evil. This is what we need to see. And he's discerning. And that language there for Pharaoh is really important. Discerning is the language that Pharaoh uses, which I thought was curious. Now, Joseph is only one of the main characters. I said there's 2 main characters, and the second isn't Pharaoh. As a matter of fact, Pharaoh is very similar in this story to us. We have dreams at times that terrify us. We are people who are lost in moments when we don't know what is going on, and we seek out for help. Pharaoh's not the other main idea, or other main character. The other one is obviously God. The curious part of it being God, though, is God, for the rest of the book of Genesis, keep in mind we have a fifth of the book left, will not speak again. God does not talk for the rest of Genesis. And yet, he's one of the two main characters. Now, how is that possible? How can a main character have no lines? How is that possible? If you can, look at chapter 41 and 38, chapter 41 verses 38 and 39 again. It says, and Pharaoh said to his servants, can we find a man like this in who does he give credit to again? The Spirit of God. Look at 39. Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since who it is? God has shown you all this. There is none so discerning and wise as you are. Now we covered that, but that'd be enough. But look at chapter 40, verse 8. Go back a little bit with me. Joseph said to them, do not interpretations belong to God? Joseph acknowledges, I don't have the answers. Even though I'm the main character in the story, I don't have the answers here. The interpretation belongs to God. Go back to chapter 41, verse 25. Joseph said to Pharaoh, the dreams of Pharaoh are one. Who reveals it? God has revealed to Pharaoh what he's about to do. And he doubles down in verse 28 of chapter 41. It is as I told Pharaoh. God has shown to Pharaoh what he is about to do. But none is as crazy as verse 32 of chapter 41. And the doubling of Pharaoh's dreams means the thing is fixed by God. God will shortly bring it about. What did I say about dreams that we've seen so far in the life of Joseph? They seem to appear in twos. They seem to appear in twos. Now, I want to take the principle that Joseph gave Pharaoh, that when a dream appears in twos, it's fixed by God. It's sure that this is what God is going to do. Now, if we take that same principle and see that they're happening in twos, we can recognize it's not just the 14 years of famine that we're dealing with. Zoom out for a second. If dreams appear in two are sure that God is going to do it, that God is the sovereign hand that moves all these things, then all of the story from Joseph has been set by God. Everyone is putty in God's hand. From Potiphar to Potiphar's wife, the brothers, to Pharaoh himself, the great sun god, they're all before. And so there's a recognition suddenly that God, though he has no lines in the rest of Genesis, he still is the main character. He's doing it all. Now, it would be so easy in this moment to skip to practical application and what we're supposed to do. But before we do and talk about us, there's one thing that we always got to do when it comes to application is ask what's happening in real time with the people who are reading this originally. So ask yourself, before you get to you, why would the original audience that Moses is writing this to, why would they need to hear that God is sovereignly over all that is going on, that he has a plan in all of this? Why would they need to know that? They need to know that because they too have just been rescued from a Pharaoh. They too find themselves in a pit-like environment of wondering, is there food? Is there water? There are giants. Is there a promised land? And Moses wants to say, but don't worry, even though you can't see it, God's working in 1,000 ways, 1,000,000 ways. He's working in all these ways you can't fully understand and you can't see. And they need to be reminded of this again and again and again. That's why the prophets come along, Isaiah in particular. He says in chapter 64, verse 8, but now, O Lord, you are our Father. We are the clay. You are our potter. And we are all the work of your hands. 24 chapters before that in chapter 40. He says, who has measured the waters in the hollows of his hand, and marked off the heavens with a span, and closed the dust of the earth in a measure, and weighed the mountains in scales, and the hills in a balance? Who has measured the Spirit of the Lord? Or what man shows him counsel? Verse 14 says, whom did he consult, and who made him understand? Who taught him the path of justice, and taught him knowledge, and showed him the way of understanding? Behold, the nations are like a drop from a bucket, and are counted as the dust on the scales. Behold, he takes up the coastlands like fine dust. What is before Israel, that they're going to need the knowledge that though they can't always see God, is giants, it's Jericho, it's the time of the judges, it's Baal, it's Ai, it's the exile, it's being landless, it's the Babylonians, it's something. It's something. They're going to be in a pit. There's something going to be before them in their disobedience. They cause these things and they don't believe that God is with them. And yet the main character in their story is always moving. He's always doing something. He's the one in charge. The nations are like the dust on a scale. They're nothing. They're nothing. He takes the coastlands in his hands. It's all about what he wants and what he's doing. And then, of course, so this leads us then, what are we supposed to do? And this is where I want to change things up a little bit with this, because I think Israel should see Joseph, and they should go, we should be content with where God has us, and we should be known as a people that God is with. That's kind of been the plan, so the nations would see that. And we too should be like what Israel should be like, right? So we too should be like Joseph. We should also acknowledge that God is doing all these things. But I want to be fully honest. When we were praying this morning, Michael Willis had prayed, Lord, whoever's teaching today, may he be humble and honest with the text. And I was kind of wrestling with what to do with this, because I think through the applications of chapter 40 and 41 and seeing what God is doing, and that where even the prosperity gospel kind of gets a part of this, right? They acknowledge that Joseph, he ends up in, second in command, but they don't want to acknowledge the pits. And maybe we're in pits, and one day heaven is like, Egypt, and you'll be second in command. I don't know, right? So I was kind of struggling with some of this. But I do know, as I see Joseph's life, I want to be like him. I want to have faith like him in that way. And I also want to believe that God is moving in 1,000 different ways. But if I'm being honest, I don't have that faith. And if I'm being really, really honest, it's easy for me to tell you to just believe God is moving in the moment that you're in, the pit you're in, when I'm not one of the 60 to 100 parents right now whose kids are missing in Texas somewhere. It's really, really easy for me to tell you that. And it's really easy for you to tell someone else that. When it feels like something is true, but a big part of you doesn't believe it's true. And there seems to be this dissonance that wrestles as Christians that sometimes we don't want to acknowledge. On the drive home, we came from California by your guys' grace, and gift to us financially as a family. We were able to go to spend a week in California. And on our way back, we got a flat tire in Blythe. And a flat tire in Blythe was almost enough to make me lose my faith. I'm sitting there in Blythe going, Lord, why? This makes no sense. We just lose 2 hours? Okay, fine. I was going to pray those 2 hours, but now I'm not going to pray. Right? There's this sense of so quickly, I'm not like Joseph. I'm quick to complain. I'm quick to moan about the moment. I'm quick to lose my faith, and I'm questioning. And it's such a silly example, but there are large things in the room right now, from miscarriages to stillborns to loss of job and loss of life. And in that moment, in the moment of the pit, God's doing 1,000 things, but it feels like, Lord, I don't have enough faith. And so here's actually what I want to do. When I took the practical application of chapter 40 and 41, and I began to work through it, as I do every week, okay, what does this look like even for me? The struggle in that moment, I thought would actually be more helpful in what I do. Instead of just saying, have more faith or believe, there's something that has been helpful over the last year that's been helpful for me that I'd like to put in front of you. And it's this. It's in those moments, just in my Christian walk, I've been praying. I'm just trying to be as honest and humble as I can and transparent as I can. I've been praying, God, can you show me why this is happening? Maybe we would have gotten into a car accident, right? On our way, if we would have not had the flat tire. Oh, okay, that would make sense. Lord, thank you for the flat tire. So I've been asking for knowledge to be revealed. But if I'm being honest, I'd say less than 1% of the time that prayer is answered in those moments. It's very rare that God actually does that. And so I've been changing my prayer. And this is how I've been changing my prayer. Can you turn to Galatians chapter 2? I think there's a principle in the doctrine of the union of Christ that we can have readily available that I think it's definitely been argued about. So I don't want to say this is big, but this is something that's been helpful for me. In Galatians chapter 2, before I read Galatians chapter 2, I need to explain something. So there's different kinds of faith. Pistis is the word for faith in Greek, which is the word trust. And so there's a salvific faith that we talk about. Usually that's the assurance of grace. The Lord has given us faith to believe on him for the salvation of our souls. But then there's this also idea of you're walking in faith. That would be the walking out in Hebrews chapter 11 mentioned, right? People are not walking in the salvific faith, though that, of course, is true and only given to us by Jesus. Then there's a walking out kind of faith, this lived out faith that's talked about. Well, Paul's building this premise in chapter 2, talking about a salvific faith, but then he changes over to a faith that is now lived out. It's the I've been crucified with Christ thing there in verse 20, chapter 2, where he goes on to say, it is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life that I now live, I live in the flesh by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me. So now he's talking about it being crucified with Christ and now living out this faith. What was curious for me, and this sounds very pompous, but I was reading this in Greek a few weeks ago. And it's I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life that I live in the flesh, I live by faith. And it's this word in that threw me. In the Son of God. Now, I think in is the right translation. And this sounds, please just give me grace. There's tenses at the end of words, similar to if you know Spanish. And depending on the case ending, that tense is what changes. And there's two that you can have here that are similar. There's something called the accusative and the genitive. And the genitive is something that is possessive. Well, this is in the genitive case. And so it throws me off because I live by faith in the Son of God. Though I think is right, I don't think it's communicating I think it's communicating a grand total of what is true, because in Christ we have what is also true, and it's this. It's if you have a King James Version Bible or a New King James Version Bible, how they translate it, because the genitive directly would translate it like this: I live by faith of the Son of God. Now, just slow down with me, if you nerd out for a second. Hear why that changes. I live in the faith of the Son of God versus I live of the faith of the Son of God. There's a sense, and this is what I've been doing over the last year, I haven't been praying that God would make it clear, but acknowledging, Lord, besides the stupid thing in Blythe, in the last week or so, there have been things that my wife and I have questioned, and I felt like I couldn't even go to God about. Like, it just really frustrated things. And it felt like he's not going to reveal to me what's going on. And Lord, I'm just being honest, I feel like I don't believe right now. I feel like I know what's true, and I go forward in my walk, but in my unbelief, I'm coming to you right now, and I feel like I like this. Here it is, I need faith. And so here's what, can I have some of your faith, Jesus? When you were in the garden, and you remained faithful and steadfast, you're my example, and I want to do that as I see Joseph. But there are times when I feel like I don't have faith, and your faith is perfect. Can I have some of your faith? And one day, when I'm perfected, I will. I'll believe fully. There'll be zero doubts in all of it. There'll be no unbelief. But right now, in my feeble state, I know I won't have all of it, but could I hive off and borrow, Jesus, some of your faith? Could you send your Spirit to me and give me some of your faith in this moment to believe? I don't have some cool Spurgeon quote. I don't have an amazing story. I have a practical thing that I can give you, put in front of you. I would encourage you in the moments of having the idea of Joseph as an example before you, and knowing that God is working in all these ways to have faith in that, I would encourage you, when you're doubting, Lord, would you give me more faith to believe? I don't need to have all the answers, but right now my faith is lacking. Can I borrow some of your faith? Let's pray.